to another episode of the Marvel Masterworks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam. And with me is my co-host, the Emerald enthusiast, but for this podcast, the Venom enthusiast, Donnie. How's it going?
Hey, what's up, comic book fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy, the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green. It is usually the Emerald enthusiast, but today, you can call me the vociferous Venom maniac as we talk about my favorite Marvel character, Venom.
Look at that cup. That's a nice.
Yeah, I'm ready today.
Every time you take a sip of that coffee or whatever's in that Venom's getting a little frisky with you there, Donnie.
It's just it's water, not green slobber. How about that?
All right.
And I have to show everybody here. Like I said, I'm decked out today.
And I've got look, I got the right universe this time.
All right, yeah. We are here, yeah.
But we're not only talking about Venom. We are also going to review, before we talk about Venom, and specifically, just so everybody knows, when we get to the Venom portion of the recording, Vidcast or podcast, depending on how you're consuming this episode, we'll be doing a review of the Lethal Protector storyline way back from the 90s. We won't be reviewing the movie because neither of us have seen Venom, Let There Be Carnage yet. So can't review something we haven't seen. So that's what we'll be talking Venom-wise. And before that, we have another episode of What If to discuss. This time we're going to talk about what if Thor was a drunken party fool. I don't know if that was the title, but I just made it the
title. Well, that's close. It's what if Thor were an only child?
I like my title better.
Yeah, your title fits. Yeah.
Anyway.
And by the way, we both want to see Venom Let There Be Carnage. We're just not feeling safe enough to go back to theaters yet. I'm waiting for a drive-in that's about an hour for me to get it. So
right. And I'm waiting for the digital release so I can watch it from the comfort of my own home. And I would go to a drive-in, but there's none close to me, so that option is not available.
Well, there aren't a lot of drive-ins left in the world. How many are left in Canada? Do you have any idea?
I don't have an exact number, but it ain't that many. And I'll tell you, given what the pandemic has shown us, maybe there should be a resurgence.
Yes. I've heard at one point that it was under a dozen in the United States that were active. So
I can imagine here. Yeah. No, but I think there should be a resurgence, but this is not the drive-in podcast. But when we've both seen Venom, Let There Be Carnage, you can be sure we will be sharing our thoughts on the movie.
Okay.
On a podcast. So don't worry about that.
Yes.
It's just a matter of when. But before we talk about Venom, let's talk about the only child version of Thor.
Yes.
So, Donnie, what was going on? Just a brief summation of this episode for the people.
Well, when it opened up, we saw Odin defeating the Frost Giants, and he discovers Loki as an infant. This is a familiar scene. Abandoned, and he returns him in this version to Laufey.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want him. Take him.
Which, that it's understandable, in retrospect, Loki doesn't come without his baggage. However, this obviously changes things for both Loki, who we later see is, looks like a frost giant, and it changes things for Thor as well. So centuries later, we see that Odin's singular son has become a loud, party-loving prince. And it makes sense because this is kind of the continuation of the personality we saw from Thor at the beginning of Thor. Yes.
Yeah. The way he behaves when we first see him in Vegas, well, even before Vegas, because his mother's having a girls' night somewhere. Or a girls' getaway weekend. I don't know where it is. Mm-hmm. Some place that I can't pronounce because it's Norse mythology. And so she leaves Asgard after Odin goes to sleep for his hibernation or whatever it is.
Yeah, the Odin sleep. The Odin sleep.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's it. That's what it's called. Yeah. So every time I go to sleep, I'm gonna call it the Adam sleep. Just it's my new terminology for it.
When I go to sleep, I'm going to call it the nerdy nap.
My version of Adam sleep would be like, if I did it like Odin style, it would be like, all right, wake me up when the Leafs win the cup.
Dude, I would.
Yeah.
We might never see one another again.
I know. I'm gonna wake up. There's gonna be flying cars. What I miss?
Right. Exactly.
What year is it? Did they win? Oh no, we just woke you up anyway. But anyway, when he right from when she leaves
yeah, Frigga leaves while Odin is asleep. So
yeah, her name is Frigga for those who don't know.
Frigga, yeah,
not Martha, Frigga. Yeah, but
why did you say that name? That's got to come to the Marvel universe somehow. But anyway,
sure, yeah, really should.
So at this point, Thor is left to his own devices, and he travels to Earth to host this kind of gigantic ongoing party with aliens and beings from across the universe. And his arrival attracts the attention of Darcy Lewis and Jane Foster,
right,
who come to investigate and kind of, join in the revelry.
Yeah, they're doing the same investigation they were at the end of the first, during the first Thor.
Yes.
But what I find interesting about Thor's sort of behavior, the aloofness, he doesn't care about anything, he's drunk. He reminds me of Tony Stark with superpowers and a hammer.
It's understandable. Both he and Tony Stark had a huge arc as far as their maturity goes.
Right, yeah.
Tony Stark, when we meet him at first, he's not all that likable, especially when you hear about.
Like them because,
some of the things that he did in his backstory, you're just like, that's a little cringy.
But I like the part about, he was with the entire Maxim calendar. Like, I respected that. I got to give him props for it,
So anyway, like I said,
Tony Stark would have a list, much like I do, and
but would he marry them though? See, all the versions of you would be a stand-up guy and actually marry.
That's true. Yeah,
you see,
I saw. Let me pat myself on the back.
Like Barry Horowitz. There you go. All right. So anyway, Thor warms up to Jane, much the way he did in the movie, and acting S.H.I.E.L.D. director at this point, this is Maria Hill. She decides that Thor's out of control, so she summons Carol Danvers because Thor's antics have become damaging.
Yeah, it's causing a lot of chaos, a lot of damage. Yeah.
So she calls in Captain Marvel to end the destruction caused by Thor, and we see one of the best fight scenes in What If in this whole series.
Right, yeah.
It was really impressive, and they actually did Captain Marvel's powers justice.
Oh yeah, I love how whenever she's appeared in this whole series, they've emphasized her like total badassery, if you will, to the point where more so than they have in the film so far, I think.
Yeah. So there is this huge battle. She's really unable to overcome Thor without really going full out, and that's what she's worried about, is using the extent of her entire power. Right. So Darcy and Hill suggest that she take the fight to somewhere less populated, less dangerous to the civilians.
Right.
And Jane contacts Frigga with the help of Heimdall. So Agent Hill, or Director Hill, readies a nuclear strike as Captain Marvel and Thor begin to fight again, but Frigga contacts them and says she's coming. So all of a sudden, Thor's like, wait a minute, Mom's coming back home. I got to settle down.
Yeah.
So Thor and the partygoers then set about to clean up the mess before she arrives, and they try to act like nothing was going on. Which, of course, he does give. He gives things away when he summons Mjolnir to him, and Mjolnir's covered with like graffiti and other things that are indicative of a party. So
right. I first of all,
Frigga's no dummy. She knows what was going
Oh,
on.
absolutely. Mom always knows, right?
Exactly.
That's something they say. I mean, I think mothers have like their version of a spidey sense, you know.
Yeah.
And whenever their kids have been secretly getting out of line, you know, they know.
Little squiggly lines come out of their head.
Especially when you might remember, I don't know if this ever happened to you, but you misbehaved, you got in trouble from a teacher at school, and somehow you magically came home and she already knew, and it was like,
yeah,
how does this happen?
Well, and my mom was a school teacher, so it was, you know.
Oh, you were screwed. Yeah. No, but like it's like this is the days before a cell phone and text messaging, so. Right. How did they know is the question. But
moms are magic. There's no doubt. So
indeed. What I liked about it was that they really portray Thor as like this. He's essentially an overgrown child. Mm-hmm. Like he hasn't matured.
Right.
And I think part of that is not having Loki, because Loki took up those traits that now Thor has the thing, and Thor became the more responsible one. He always was, even though he was a little arrogant, mm-hmm. Even in the original Thor movie, he was always seemed more responsible than Loki, even though he was arrogant. So I think because, you know, Loki had taken up those qualities in the films, Thor felt the need to like smarten up a lot sooner. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, because Loki's not there to the same level, you know, he doesn't have the reference of, okay, Loki's behaving like this. You know, Dad doesn't appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Mom doesn't appreciate that. If I want to be king, I gotta act differently. But I did like that. Excuse me. Even though they weren't raised as brothers, they still, when they did meet Thor and Loki, mm-hmm. they still had a brotherly kind of bond.
Yes, they definitely liked one another. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So actually, this episode ends. Thor asks Jane Foster out on a date, but he's interrupted by an army of the Ultron drones led by Ultron himself, who is in Vision's body and wearing this Ultron type of armor and in the possession of the Infinity Stones.
Right, yeah, which is...
That was a shocking way to end this. Yeah,
absolutely. And let me tell you, Ultron was a pretty formidable foe.
Wow.
At least from the MCU perspective before. Mm-hmm. What if?
Yeah.
And imagine now with the Infinity Stones, it's even worse.
Yeah.
But visually, he looks incredible.
Right. Well, the version that we are going to see in the last two episodes that we will talk about right here on Multiverse Musings, the Vidcast.
Right.
We will talk about that. Shameless plug. We will we'll talk about that. This version kind of evolves and becomes far more powerful than what we saw in Age of Ultron.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that one was already pretty formidable. Mm-hmm. Now add the Infinity Stones and Vision's body, and
right.
we got a whole lot of problems. Mm-hmm. So
I mean, obviously, he was on, basically the same level of awareness as the Watcher. So I mean, you're talking about a pretty profound evolution. So
yeah.
But anyway, so let me just go back to the episode here. What if Thor were an only child? I want to say it wasn't my favorite episode, right. But I think it was necessary. Between all the dark episodes,
it was
to kind
fun,
of have something like this. It's kind of whimsical, right. To not like, where you feel like every episode is going to end on a downer, and and you have to wait until the end to see something kind of upbeat. So
right. Look, it's not the best episode of the series by any means, but like I said, you needed the break from the constant darkness and seriousness, which I wish another franchise that got cut short, or I won't say the name, but a 5-arc film plan got cut short because there was too much darkness and seriousness and oh my God, and you know where I'm going, but I won't say what it is because that'll start all kinds of chaos on the internet. But so there is good.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, no, there is good. There is good. There are moments in an overarching story where some levity, a little bit of a break in the seriousness of it all is necessary, and I think this fulfills that void. I will say that this is my favorite piece of Thor material in the MCU since the first film.
Oh, okay.
The first film was great, but after the first film, I'd rank this, and then just barely Ragnarok, and then Dark World. But I didn't like either 2 or 3. I'll be honest with you. Thor 2 and Thor 3 are not my cup of tea. I know everybody loves Ragnarok, but if I wanted to watch Flash Gordon, I'd watch Flash Gordon.
Okay.
I want to watch Thor. So it wasn't my cup of tea. So this is the second best Thor thing in the MCU so far, after the first one, for me, anyway.
Right. Yeah. I did like Ragnarok. That's a different podcast, so we can go on about that some other day. So.
Oh yeah, we'll do the Thor stuff another podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we give it a rating now before we move on to the comics.
Indeed. So what do you think? What are you rating it?
Wasn't it? Do we do letter grade or out of 5?
I don't remember.
Okay. Well, how about this then? I will give it either a B or a 4. So.
And I'm right there with you. B4 for Thor.
You're on today, man.
Yeah.
B4 for Thor.
I'm on caffeine is what I'm on. Here's the Tim. Wait. Let's put up the Tim Hortons advertisement. Come on, sponsor us, damn it. Come on.
Hey, yes, exactly.
Free advertisement. Come on.
We need a sponsor so we can podcast, endlessly. So
from the first coffee to the last. Right here. Which is this won't be my last one today. I'll have another one later, but espresso, different.
Right.
Anyway, this is not the coffee podcast. I'll tell you what it won't be. It won't be the Nespresso and that garbage that George Clooney promotes. I'll tell you that right now. That ain't coffee. That's discolored. Never mind.
All right. So now, do we go on to
Venom?
Yeah. Do we go on to Venom? Okay. The scene, I believe.
Venom. Give Donnie. Give some. You're the. I mean, I'm a fan of Venom, but you're the
sure.
Venom enthusiast. So
yes.
Give us a little background on what led up to Lethal Protector, which is what we're going to review today.
Well, at this point, Venom had been around for about 5 years, and in Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 375, we saw Spider-Man help Venom in a very dire situation where the symbiote was weakened. He helps save Anne Wayne. Spider-Man does. And at this point, Spider-Man and Venom call a truce. And Venom's like, you don't come after me, I won't come after you. And so from that point, and this was done because Venom had begun to develop such a fan base. And I've got something to say at the end of this podcast, too. I have just a little bit of a rant, nothing that's not PG-13, nothing that's not child-friendly that a kid can hear.
You've never gone on a real rant yet. I'm waiting for. I mean, there was the Hulk one, the mini Hulk one that you had. The other episode, we talked about the Hulk where we agreed, but I've yet to see you go. Donnie, you're gonna go on one of my rants.
Yeah, no, this is something that I feel like needs to be said. But Venom was a character that, despite the fact that it was the 90s, the late 80s, and into the 90s, Venom was a breakout character, and people wanted to see more of Venom than just in the Spider-Man books.
Sure, yeah.
So Lethal Protector was his first titular book, Venom Lethal Protector number 1. Mm-hmm. So the stage is set. Eddie Brock has moved out to San Francisco, and Lethal Protector number 1 opens with Eddie saving a woman from being robbed and possibly either sexually assaulted or assaulted, either way, in a dark alley.
Right.
And Venom intervenes on this woman's behalf, and he, just in case you haven't figured it out from the title Lethal Protector, he has no problems using lethal force. And this is one of the like best Venom scenes there are out there that exists, because you can see this and see Venom's personality as an anti-hero here. He intervenes on this woman's part, and he suffocates her attacker with the symbiote by shooting the symbiote down his throat. He kills the guy, and then turns around to the woman and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. We're being rude. I'm Venom." I remember reading that for the first time, and I could not stop laughing.
My favorite part was when he taps her on the head, and
he passes her
and it's like, "You can say thank you now." And then
he says, no thanks are needed.
Oh, yeah.
And then he leaps away, and she's crying, and she screams and runs away.
She's traumatized, yeah.
I cannot get enough of that scene. That scene is just so beautiful. So, yeah. So, Venom then transforms into Eddie, because, again, he's out in San Francisco, but he doesn't have a home yet. He doesn't have anything permanent there.
Yeah.
So he transforms to Eddie. By the way, this is drawn by Mark Bagley. There is a change in pencilers midway through, but Eddie looks gloriously 90s here. He's got the mullet. He's got the midriff bearing tank top, and the big jeans, and it's just very 90s.
All right, I want to say something about the whole mullet fiasco. Was that a thing? Like, was that particular to the U.S.? Because I remember in Canada in the 90s, I didn't see too many mullets.
They were in plentitude here in the U.S., and a lot of comic book characters had them too. Superman.
I know, but it must have been like mainly an American trend, because here I didn't see many mullets that I can recall.
It was a very 80s thing. You go back and look at like music videos, professional wrestling.
I get it. It's just I don't think it was very prevalent in Canada. I'm sure some people had it, but it wasn't like,
Well, that's probably a good thing that it wasn't in plenitude in Canada, so where you were. So.
Right. Yeah.
So we see a major storyline.
The jeans were, I will say.
Oh, yeah.
Jeans, I remember.
Right. And I'm going to confess, I wore lots of FUBU back in the day. You remember what the Road Warriors were? The big FUBU pants? Oh, yeah. Had lots of those. Anyway, so we can go down memory lane another time.
Yeah.
But we see that Eddie is immediately approached by the police, and they try to take him in for the murder of a guard at the vault. Now, again, this is going to come into play right away. Let's not romanticize things here. At this point, Eddie has killed some innocent people before his baby face turn.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have those old murders to deal with, because he does. Yeah. And that's part of what makes this character so great. There's a lot of complexity with these storylines. Yeah. So Eddie gets away from the police. He's trying to find somewhere to stay when he comes upon some seemingly transient people in a park, and they are getting assaulted, which naturally Eddie intervenes as Venom, because he's like, these innocent, powerless people are getting assaulted. So, of course, he comes to their aid. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, we see that Peter Parker is watching the news, and he's getting the stories about Venom seemingly attacking people.
Yeah.
And so, of course, based on what he knows of Venom, why would he not assume that? So he hops on a plane and goes out to the West Coast.
Right here, there's a piece of dialogue that you can guarantee was, if you didn't know this was from the 90s, you'll know right in this scene where he calls Mary Jane. Something to the extent of, sweetheart, pack me a bag. And it's like, buddy, if you tried that in 2021, the other end of the phone would sound something like this. Pack your own effing bag, you misogynist, and then hang up the phone. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is the 90s.
Yeah, well, and Mary Jane looked very 90s in that too. She had on the aerobics outfit with the the big hair.
Yeah, and there was a shot where she was like looking out the window, and I'm like, hey man, I'm getting a view. Is it coming now? This was later on. I'm like,
Well, you know, I mean, that's
comic book Mary Jane. If she was a real person, would be on the list.
So Peter sees that Venom, like I said, he's out in California.
Yeah.
And so he arrives at that park, and Venom is angered by the fact that Spidey is breaking their agreement. He's like, you said you would stay away.
Yeah.
So, but in the middle of this, the goons who had been attacking the seemingly transient people, they turn on both Spider-Man and Venom.
Right.
So Eddie, again, remember at this point, Eddie and Venom, they don't set off Spider-Man's spider sense. So he can, once he like kind of gets away from Spider-Man's, normal senses, then Spider-Man can't have, any way of tracking him.
Right.
So Eddie actually leaves with the people and goes underground. And we find out that these people actually live underground, where there's a group of these like giant robotic digger exosuits that have men inside them. They are from Roland Treese, who's part of the Life Foundation. And these people are kind of under attack by these giant like digger exosuits.
Right. Now, the interesting thing is when Venom was fighting with the guy in the exosuit, and they sort of fell through and fell into this other city, if you will, or underground city.
Right.
I think the guy in the exosuit says, because they're wearing like clothing not of the time. Some of the people.
It's kind of an analog world.
Yeah. So the guy is like, what are we, time travel? Something about time travel. So when the issue ends, I'm like, wait a minute, because this is my first time actually reading the full story. I was like, wait, there's time travel in the Venom book? I didn't know. And then in issue 2, it was like, no, it's not time. And then they explained that. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, cool, but I was kind of hoping for time travel.
Well, yeah, you get it with other Venom stories, but actually the line is, Venom is fighting with these diggers and these giant, like, huge digger exosuits, these men in them, and he's having quite the time with them because they're enormous. Yeah. And they also have a thing called a sonic
almost like
shuttle.
Hulkbusters kind of thing.
Yeah, they look kind of like that. And again, they have sonic weapons, so those affect Venom. And at one point, they fall through the floor. Yeah. And he says, "This is bigger than your petty bloodlust. Look around, we've fallen through time."
Yeah.
And like I said, what it is that they've fallen into this underground city, which is kind of an analog world that we'll learn more about as this progresses. But that's how issue number 1 ends.
Right.
Yeah. So issue number 2, Venom is continuing to fight these men in these exosuits who hurt him again with a thing called a sonic shovel. It's a thing that they were kind of using to kind of break the ground underneath the ground. And Venom has no problem ending a fight quickly. He kills the men in the exosuits.
Yeah.
Nope. Yeah. No reservation whatsoever about killing the bad guys.
Yeah.
So later on, we will learn what Roland Treese was actually after. But for the meantime, Venom goes with these underground dwellers to they're like, city council. And he's asked to he asked to stay with them and he's rejected. They know about him. They know he's dangerous.
Yeah, I thought that was rude.
Well, I mean, you can see, these are obviously people who, they are, a lot of them were very nervous, and just nervous about, contact
I get why, because
with surface world,
from their perspective, he transforms into a monster, so
yeah. Right. But yeah, you're right, he saved them. He
did save you.
Yes.
Ingredients.
And it wasn't in full agreement. We see later on that some of these people were
advocating
they were very
for
split.
him. Yeah.
So Spider-Man decides to go see Eddie's father, Carl Brock, for answers about his son. And let me say this, Carl Brock, I can't overstate just how important Carl Brock is to the development of Eddie and Venom. We talk about Eddie is looked at a lot and Venom is looked at a lot as a character dependent on Spider-Man. Right. This starts to develop Eddie before his adulthood, and we start to see things. We'll get into this a little bit later, We start to see things that gives you a much greater look into Eddie Brock's personality.
Yeah, and you get the sense right off the bat, before they even go into the full-blown, backstory, just from his early interactions with Peter, you get the sense that this guy's a jerk and in nowhere near Father of the Year material.
By no means, yeah. Yeah. So at the end of this issue, we see the jury that comes out to confront Venom. There's a lot of new characters introduced in this to kind of develop Venom's world outside of Spider-Man's world. That's what I like about this. Yeah. So the jury is led by people comprised of members of the families of Venom's victims, including the leader, and that is General Orwell Taylor. And they come after Venom, and he is the father, again, of Hugh Taylor, who was one of the guards at the vault that Venom murdered.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember, Venom was very, kind of sad and broken up about having to do that. He was very conflicted, even before this story. But he felt like he was justified because he had this mission of killing Spider-Man. So again, you see that Venom is not a character who, he's complex. He can kind of go either way morally.
Yeah, he's very selective who he wants to kill.
Yeah, exactly. So what was your initial reaction to the jury?
I mean, I like the idea that they're formed from people, relatives of people that Venom's murdered. That makes a lot of sense. And again, it's kind of like the literal manifestation of your past mistakes coming back to bite you in the rear end.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's a great. I think it's a great coalition of people. And again, you're in a stage where in Venom's history, where you're trying to build out his world independently from Spider-Man. So you have to come up with something that.
And again, we see a lot of that here. So issue 2 ends. Issue 3 picks up with that fight. The jury, again, armed with Sonics, armed with mech suits that kind of look a little bit like Iron Man's, and they attack Venom. He is still able to kind of fight them to a standstill, and he's able to escape. So meanwhile, Spider-Man, he's still on Venom's trail. But we also learn at this point from a woman named Sharon Dempsey, who is the housekeeper of Carl Brock. And I want to, like, everybody, you need to listen to this. If you've never read this story, this is so important to Eddie Brock's development. We learned that Eddie's mother, Jamie, died giving birth to Eddie. And Carl always resented Eddie after that. Eddie was desperate for his approval, whether it was his grades in school or excelling in athletics or later on his journalism career. He was always desperate for Carl's approval, and Carl would not give it to him. And then when the Sin Eater hoax happened, Carl completely severs all of his ties with Eddie. So Eddie was a traumatized child who became a traumatized, bitter adult, full of self-loathing and full of loathing for his father. So really, Spider-Man was just a scapegoat. Spider-Man was this external tormentor that Eddie looked at and said, oh, if I can just rip that from my life, I'll be happy.
Right.
When really it was all this past trauma, decades of it, that he was dealing with. And he kind of projected that onto Spider-Man.
Right. Yeah, no, it was very, like, you instantly start to feel for Eddie when you see those flashbacks play out. And, even Spider-Man comments on it, is like, I actually feel sorry for him. But, it's terrible the way the father treated him, but I'm not saying I condone it, but it's not out of the realm of reality that somebody would have those feelings, right? If they lost their wife due to childbirth, like I said, I don't condone anybody treating their kid like that because, of complications, and the mother and the wife, died because of the birth. But it's a reaction that is plausible, believable.
Well, and like I said, that's why, for me, that's why Venom as a character and why Eddie Brock spoke to me so much is that even as a comic book character, you understood Eddie's motivation.
Yeah.
And you can see how Eddie's mother dying and profoundly affecting his father would then affect Eddie. So there was an element of reality to this, even though it involved the living costume that you understood.
Yeah, I mean, there's an alien symbiote, but at the core, that kind of scenario is very down to earth and realistic.
So issue number 3, by the way, the first appearance of Roland Treese. Venom is continually pursued by the jury. Treese actually shows up in a helicopter and airlifts Venom away. And he's like, I'd rather have you as my ally. And he was like, I want to make you my new head of security. But of course, I
like Venom's reaction. Is there pay?
Yeah, exactly. And I really love the humorous touches with the character. So.
Oh yeah, and it's nice to see that was a part of the character, from early on. So it's not like people can say, "Oh, the movie's just pulling that out of the rear end,"
No. So, like I said, it's a double cross. What Treese actually wants are spawns of the symbiote.
Yeah.
This is kind of a goal of the Life Foundation. So, issue 4. Notice there is an art change here. Ron Lim takes over from Mark Bagley. I prefer Bagley's style, but that doesn't mean anything is wrong with Lim's style at all.
Yeah.
I do, but if you've ever seen, Venom rendered with kind of the jagged eyes, and rendered even bigger actually than the way that Bagley did it, so you can see, immediately the change in art style. So, and we see the first female symbiote, and that is right away within the first few pages. We see Donna Diego, and that is Scream.
Okay.
And she attacks Spider-Man. Now, she does not beat Spider-Man. Obviously, Spider-Man is a seasoned hero at this point, and she's actually evacuated by a hovercraft, and Spidey stows away on this hovercraft to see that Eddie has been imprisoned and forcibly separated from the symbiote by Carlton Drake of the Life Foundation. Obviously, that he's somewhat different in the movie than he is in the comics, but that should be a familiar name to you if you've seen the movie. So
definitely, yeah.
Yes.
The interesting thing about when Spider-Man was fighting the name
Scream.
Scream. Yeah. The whole banter where he's like, normally I won't hit a woman, but when she's trying to kill me, I make an exception.
Well, yeah, he doesn't have much choice there, does he? So
the banter
there's also an interesting scene in this. Venom is being held in this like sonic bubble, and he actually retracts the symbiote and uses his own arm to get out of the bubble, because remember, he is not only, does he have control of the symbiote like that, but Eddie Brock has world-class strength.
Right, yeah.
So, even without the symbiote, he's still a dangerous individual.
I like the way Eddie and the symbiote talk that through, right? Where it's like,
yeah.
I can't help you in this situation because of the sonics and all that, but you can get us out, right?
Yeah, and I like that, and that's what the movies, in my opinion, get right. Venom, at first, Venom was a character dependent on Spider-Man.
Right.
But he wasn't that way beyond Lethal Protector, and that's what I'm going to get to at the end of this episode. This is Venom becoming his own character, breaking away. And part of the reason why he is so appealing is because he's actually two characters in one. It's Eddie Brock, it's a symbiote, the two of them together. That's why the movie works so well. It's about the relationship between those two.
Yeah.
Some people even call it a weird love story.
Which I would agree with, yeah.
Yeah. So issue number 5, we actually see that the Life Foundation's plan comes to fruition. We see 5 symbiotes: Scream, whom we already saw, Lasher, Riot, Phage, and Agony. And I really like the scene where Spider-Man's looking at him. He's like, 5 Venoms?
Yeah. No, that was great. And the art in that scene was great. When you see them all grouped together.
Yeah.
And you like looking, Spider-Man's looking at, like, you're getting a POV shot of like over the shoulder of Spider-Man looking at.
Yeah.
That was cool.
And they're all coming at him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember reading that, the word bubble is perfect. 5 Venoms.
And I like when he's like, I should have stayed in New York.
Right. So the Life Foundation, they're actually an elitist survivalist group born out of paranoia. And they think when, there's the world ends, that they're going to use these symbiotes as their security. However, again, Spider-Man is a veteran fighter, a veteran hero, and he actually is able to handle all 5 of them because he knows how to use his powers.
Sure, yeah.
Eddie, who is seemingly dead for a while, he's only mostly dead. He's not all dead.
Yeah, that's the motto of comics.
Yeah. So he actually recovers, even though he's been separated from the symbiote, and he joins Spidey in the fight. Now, he's naked for several pages, and luckily we don't see more than we'd like to. But you would think Spidey'd be like, "Oh, you're naked. Let me web you up some boxers here, buddy."
Yeah, I mean, why not?
Yeah. So they actually hold off the other symbiotes with some sonic blasters. Then eventually, Eddie finds the Venom symbiote again. And I like how Spider-Man was like, I can't believe that I just helped Eddie find, the symbiote.
Yeah.
And I just helped Venom be one again.
If you told me I'd be helping him find it.
Yeah. And of course, Eddie, there's been several versions of this line in the comics, but I like it so much. He's like, for once again and forever, we are Venom.
Yeah, that was a great line. Yeah. Loved it.
So actually, and again, you see an interesting scene here. Spider-Man and Venom are trying to decide, what to do, to put these symbiotes down. And of course, Venom is like, well, let's just use some of this tech around us. And if we kill them, we kill them. So what? They made their choice. And Spider-Man's like, we don't know if the humans inside are possibly victims. And Venom's like, so what? Whatever, And so
it sounds like my reaction to a certain group of people right now.
That's a different podcast. So anyway, so what Venom does is he's like, I promised you I wouldn't kill you, Spider-Man, but I didn't say anything about knocking you out. So he snakes the symbiote around Spider-Man and knocks him out. So, which at the time, he kind of blasts the symbiotes, and the people do survive, but the symbiotes are put down temporarily. So.
Yeah, and then when Spider-Man wakes up, he's like, "What'd you do?" He's like, "What if they didn't survive?" He's like, "But they did."
Well, they did. He's like, "Is there no pleasing you, Spider-Man?" Okay, so after Venom knocks out Spider-Man, Carlton Drake tries to blow them both up, but Spidey and Venom get away separately. Now, issue number 6 opens up with Venom having escaped the Life Foundation, and he's actually at the estate of Roland Treese. And he terrorizes one of Treese's confidants, this is Mr. Crane, into telling him being Eddie, what Treese wants with this underground society in San Francisco. And what we learn is actually that part of the ground fell during the earthquake of 1906. Which is actually a real earthquake, yes.
Yeah.
And this society sprung up from that part of the ground that fell underneath.
Okay.
However, there's gold bullion down there.
Of course there is.
Yeah. So
a rich person wants to get richer. That's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll do whatever he has to get rich.
Yeah, exactly. So we see also, though, the exosuited diggers that we talked about earlier on that Eddie fought, they had also terrorized the people underneath the ground. And Treese was worried that some witnesses may come forward, so he wanted to eliminate them.
Mm-hmm.
So the other part of his plan is to set off charges that's going to kill anyone who may have witnessed that. So Eddie, of course, hurriedly, frantically tries to get to them. And Spider-Man catches up to him. And in what is, I think, not only my favorite moment in this, but one of my favorite Venom moments just in all of his stories, is you really see the anti-hero transformation here, because he's like, Spider-Man, you have to help me.
Yeah, we need your help.
Oh my gosh, I remember reading that and like almost feeling tears in my eyes, because all of a sudden Venom's like, no matter how much I hate you, I've got to save these people. Please help me.
Yeah, so the interesting thing for me is that, first of all, in terms of, just to go back, with that Mr. Crane character, I just want to say, in some multiverse, he's related to Jonathan Crane, maybe a cousin, something of that nature. Or even better, is he's basically, what I'd like them to do, Sony, is in part 3 of Venom, because there will be a part 3. Or I'd like to see a scene, to continue playing on the comedy of a special appearance by a famous Dr. Crane, and that is Dr. Fraser Crane. And I'd like to see Venom and Eddie undergoing couples counseling from Dr. Fraser Crane. That would be fantastic. I'd watch that movie.
That would be one. Eddie, tell me about your relationship with your father.
So, Sony, get on that, ASAP.
Of course, Roz would hit on Eddie Brock.
Oh, absolutely. Who didn't she hit on?
Right. So, Venom and Spider-Man.
She had more partners than I have Multiverse wife. So
that's true. So no judgment, So Spider-Man and Venom get to where Treese is, and they're immediately attacked by men in the exosuits. And during this battle, and Spider-Man's basically able to like turn one against the other. Like he's able to make one malfunction and destroy the other. Venom goes after Roland Treese. In the battle, this fire erupts around this trailer that Treese runs into. And so Venom is forced to put himself through an enormous amount of physical pain to get to Roland Treese, because he's got to send the symbiote through the fire.
Right.
In a really powerful scene.
So,
but go ahead.
A couple of things, though. There was a scene where, after, Venom does the whole asking Spider-Man for help. There's a scene where they join up, like they agree to, work together.
Yeah.
Where Venom is in the foreground, and right behind them, over his shoulder, Spider-Man. They're doing their heroic. Venom is crouching and Spider-Man standing, very heroically. That image, one of my favorites of the whole Lethal Protector storyline. The two of them together like that was amazing. And then the other one is, you said Venom, Eddie and Venom have to go through the fire. That whole sequence was so heroic. Like, you throw some Hans Zimmer music behind that, and you get some, and then on top of that, from a character point of view, it really shows you the transition, as you were saying, from, villainous, Venom to heroic Venom, because he's willing to put his own safety on the line into something that can legitimately hurt him or worse to save innocent people.
And the dialogue is perfect here. Spider-Man sees this happen, and he asks Eddie, he said, how could you put yourself through something like that? And Venom looks at him and said, would you have done any less?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Love that scene.
Yeah, it was great.
So the story ends with Spider-Man returning to New York. Venom is actually approached by Elizabeth and Ethan from this underground society, and he's accepted as their protector. at the end of the story.
Yeah, and I think it's a coming of full circle kind of thing.
Like I said, I mean, this is one of my favorite stories. There's a lot of good Venom stories out there. There's a lot of, we just recently had the series that you and I reviewed, number 200 here. A lot of great writing in that. Yeah.
A lot of great number one, and we're getting number one now, and that's going to be, Donnie, the first time I'm collecting physically Venom. Like, I'm so excited. I was so, because, I got 200 via digital because I was getting the previous Venom series digitally. But I was so impressed with 200 that I made the decision that if they relaunch Venom, I was going to put it on my pull list. And when I saw the creative team, it was Al Ewing and Ram V on writing, and then Brian Hitch on art, I said, yeah, you know the gif of Futurama where he's like, shut up and take my money.
Take my money.
Take my money. Yeah, I mean that swayed me, but I love this story because there's a lot of full circle moments. It's the full circle moment of Eddie being accepted by this community, but also of Venom going from, like as I just said, villain to hero, and a part of being a side character to a fully formed character in his own right. So a lot of full circle moments happening in this story.
So what would you rate this story?
So now we're doing art and
art and story.
So we're doing 5 out of 5 both times, right? So I'm going to say, from a story point of view, it's an absolute 5. Like I said, I loved it. It gave me just the right amount of backstory from both his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man and then the backstory with his father in his youth. And again, all the moments where it sets something up and then it comes full circle. It did that 3 times in the 6-issue story. And it just, the balance of, the fear and violence that Venom can extol on people, but also the humor and heroics that Venom can be about. It's a beautiful balance, and I think they get all the ingredients just right in there for a very satisfying meal of a story. So I'm going to say a 5 story-wise. Art is a 4.5, just because I like Bagley's art a smidge better than Lim, and when they made the transition, you could tell it was a different artist. Like, it wasn't. Sometimes in the transition from one artist to another, it's so minuscule that it just flows and you can't really tell. Like, your eye doesn't pick it up, but here the eye, my eye noticed it. So it's like, it was a little. I got used to it, and I like Ron Lim. There's not a knock on Ron Lim. But I just prefer Bagley, I just on that note, I can't believe how many years Mark Bagley has drawn Spider-Man for. Like, he did 100 or so issues of Ultimate Spider-Man?
He is a very prolific creator.
So it's a 4.5 story and 4.5 art and 5 story.
I'm going to go 5 and 5 again. The change, even though I do prefer Bagley's a little bit to Lim's, it wasn't such a shock to me that it detracted in any way from the story. So I'm going to say 5 story, 5 art. Great.
Perfect. So, Donnie and I have made an effort to we've said that one of the things we're going to, a couple of the characters we're going to key in on, because we're really going to, we're going to cover a bunch of different Marvel stuff and DC stuff on our other podcast, but we want to key on specific favorite characters of ours more so, we want to throw some more attention. So Donnie and I have said that, we're going to key in on Spider-Man. We're going to key on Venom. And for my own, the purposes of my machinations, we're going to focus on Daredevil, and it'd be cool to get Donnie, some more Daredevil exposure, because I venture you haven't read too much.
Not recently, but I do like Daredevil.
Okay,
I have read some in the past. Yes.
So what we're going to do is, in that spirit, I was roughly talking to Donnie about really going more deeper in on Venom, and what we might end up doing is, in addition to covering the new ongoing, which comes out at the end of October, we're also thinking about doing something that we're doing for Green Lantern and Kyle Rayner, where we go back and track the history of the character. We may do that with Venom as well, and we'll set that up. So that's our plan. We're going to do a deep dive into Venom.
Deep dive, yeah.
So,
and again, I have, before we sign off, though, I definitely want a couple of minutes to say something.
Now you do your rant. Go ahead.
Okay.
Should I get popcorn?
Yeah, get your popcorn ready.
I don't have any, but damn it, I should have saved that donut for this.
Again, this won't be anything that a kid can't hear, but something I feel like I need to say. This story was written by writer David Michelinie, and there are people who want to deny David Michelinie his place in creating Venom. Now, it's true that he didn't create the idea of the black costume being a living entity. It's also true that Todd McFarlane created a visually stunning character, and that definitely led to Venom's success.
Of course. Yeah.
But as someone who was there from the start, let me say that Michelinie caught lightning in a bottle. Venom is a character who is greater than the sum of his parts. Much like Wolverine and Deadpool, he had intangibles that led the character to become far greater than anyone could have imagined at the start. Michelinie blended horror touches, dark comedic elements, and a traumatic backstory to form a unique personality for Eddie Brock and, by extension, Venom. After Lethal Protector, Venom was no longer dependent on Spider-Man to be a marketable character. Venom, as we know, is actually two characters in one, and both sides of Venom were fleshed out to be a complicated individually and complicated collectively character. Venom became a breakout phenomenon at a time before blockbuster movie franchises, before TV comic book adaptations. That was really difficult to do, yet we know the results.
Yeah.
There are fans who were absolutely assured that Venom would not work without Spider-Man on the big screen. They said that he was popular originally because of his appearance, and that novelty has worn off. That's what they said. And yet here we are. Now Venom is starring in his second blockbuster film. Now, for those of us who immersed ourselves in Venom as a titular character in the 1990s, it's not a shock at all. While both Matt Gargan and Flash Thompson were successful to varying degrees as Venom, neither one rivaled the wild popularity of the original version. David Michelinie laid the groundwork for this character to become a cultural phenomenon. The fact is, what he and Todd McFarlane did was magic. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to give, we've said it on this podcast, comics really is about, the most successful characters and stories are the perfect coming together of story and art. Mm-hmm. You may have a really good story, but if the design is not up to snuff, then if it's not nice to look at, mm-hmm. A big part of comics is I'm looking at this thing, so
sure.
I gotta enjoy what I'm looking at. But at the same time, you can have Jim Lee could draw you the greatest character in the world. Todd McFarlane can draw you the greatest looking character in the world. But if the story is, paint by the numbers, it's not either the series isn't gonna last, or the character isn't going to be popular enough to get his own series.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just want to say that because I've seen, and I actually recently saw Michelinie make some comments on it that people are just like, well, you didn't really create Venom. Again, I think I just spoke my mind on this character. I was there from the start, and this captured my imagination in a way that made me a comic book fan for life.
And just to your talk on the movies, what we'll say is that, look, the Venom Let There Be Carnage opened to 90 million, its first weekend.
The first movie made almost $1 billion,
which is 10 million over the opening weekend of the first Venom. Right, the first Venom made 80 point something. This one made 90 point something. Now look, that's impressive given that we're in a pandemic situation. But as of this weekend, it's going into its second weekend. Mm-hmm. It's most likely going to drop to second place because there's a new James Bond movie out.
Okay.
The drop is probably going to be quite steep. I'm sure you're gonna read articles saying, "Oh, look at the decline of Venom. Look at the second week drop." There are very logical explanations for that drop. I can tell you before I even see it. There's a brand new James Bond out the week after Venom, so right there, that's taking eyeballs away from Venom. There's also a pandemic. Now, in past years, if you like the movie, you wanted to go see it again, you'd have no problem. You'd have no qualms about going back to the theater a second time. In a pandemic, I barely want to go the first time, let alone back again.
Right. I haven't even thought about going to a movie since it started.
So the repeat viewings in theaters are going to suffer because of that.
Right.
And because there were so many delays with movies, we're going to have release upon release upon release. No movie is going to have a week or two in between with minimal to no competition, and big drops are going to be the follow. But I think the studio is going to look at that opening weekend and say, if all things were normal, and we would have had a week or two to ourselves, Venom: Let There Be Carnage would have probably finished with either more or around the same total gross as the first Venom. So they'll push ahead with the third.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
And when this thing hits streaming, it's going to break streaming records. When it hits home video, when it hits Blu-ray,
streaming and home video are going to propel it to another level. So, look, it's probably in the grand scheme of things, going to make less than the original, probably quite a bit less. And you're going to see doom and gloom articles because that's what gets clicks. But I'm just telling you, I've just outlined the reasons. And for all the box office prognosticators who, look at the success of it, we're out of no more delays for movies anymore. Folks, I'm glad Venom: Let There Be Carnage is doing well. I'm glad it exceeded expectations. I'm glad that the projections for a James Bond movie are good. I'm glad that people are going to the movies again that feel comfortable. But the situation we're in is very, very, tenuous. It's ever changing. Mm-hmm. So we're out and no more movie delays. By December, that could change.
Exactly.
So
and it could change from place to place too.
Yeah. So let's just look. Do we like going to movies? I'm echoing Venom. Do we like going to movies? Yes. And if we like going to movies, then we still have to carefully tread through the situation we're in because it's not over. So these movie prognosticators have to stop fooling themselves and the people that follow them and people that want to go to the movies. We got to stop fooling ourselves. This is not a normal situation we're in still, And so when we're looking at these numbers, let's be mindful of that. And so if you see the clickbait, because you're going to, I guarantee you're going to see it. I'm sure the studio is prepared for what's about to happen. So I think we're going to see definitely a third Venom, and who knows what else.
Yes. So before we go, I also want to recommend the Venomnibus. If you're looking for a Christmas
gift. Look how beautiful that cover. Look at that cover.
Mm-hmm.
That is a beautiful.
And you'll see on the back all the books, all the miniseries that this collects. It's not cheap, but it is well worth it. I love this.
That is a foreign object, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if I hit Matt Riddle with this, I'd knock him out. So.
Oh, I'm gonna go. Just walk around and see if I see any moronic protesters that are ridiculous. Walk around with. Well, actually, I don't want to go near them because they're unvaccinated. But
Right.
If I had a hazmat suit on, I'd go hit them from behind with that omnibus. But I digress. Definitely, there's gonna be a lot more Venom talk, a lot more Spidey talk on this show. So if you like that stuff, then stay tuned. And if you want to talk more Venom, but don't spoil the movie for Donnie and myself, you can. Donnie, where can they find you on the socials?
You can find me on Twitter as the Emerald Enthusiast. Let's talk collectibles. Let's talk comics. Let's talk Venom.
And if you want to talk to me about Venom or Spider-Man or any Marvel character or any DC character or even wrestling, you can do that at Adam_LeafsFan. We have a podcast Twitter account at MMNPDC. And we have a Facebook group if Facebook is more your thing. And it's in the description below.
And it is working.
Yeah.
Not down.
It is now, yeah. Click it.
Oh, yeah.
I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But until next time, remember that Venom is forever. From the first time Eddie Brock bonds with the symbiote to the last. So long, everybody.
So long, everyone.